The vast expanse of the mining colony on Epsilon Auriga 7 seemed to stretch forever, a maze of glistening refineries and shadowy corridors carved deep into the planet's surface. Nyla Valter, or just Nyla as everyone knew her, wiped the sweat from her brow and surveyed the day's haul of iridescent ore. To her, this was home, a rough, unyielding world of labor and simplicity, far removed from the chaos of Earth. "Good work today, Nyla," said Drenlusk, her grizzled supervisor, patting her on the shoulder. "You'll make foreman in no time if you keep this up." She laughed, brushing the stray locks of auburn hair from her face. "I'll pass. Last thing I want is more responsibility." But as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the colony in hues of crimson and gold, Nyla couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Her instincts proved correct. That evening, as the workers gathered in the communal hall for their nightly meal, the air crackled with tension. A holographic screen in the corner flickered to life, its usual grainy broadcast replaced by a breaking news report from Earth. "The High Chancellor is dead," the announcer said, his voice trembling. "Aaron Valter was assassinated during the Unity Summit earlier today. The attack has plunged Earth into turmoil, with multiple factions declaring sovereignty. The Galactic Concord has called an emergency meeting to discuss intervention." Gasps rippled through the room, and Nyla froze, the name hitting her like a hammer. Aaron Valter. It wasn't a name she'd heard often, but she knew it. Her mother had whispered it to her once, long ago, before disappearing without explanation. As murmurs filled the hall, the hologram shifted to a shadowy figure delivering a message directly to Nyla. Her heart pounded as the figure spoke. "To the last Heir of the Valter line, you are Earth's only hope for unity. Your father's death was no accident, and forces beyond comprehension are at play. They will come for you. Run or take your rightful place as Earth's leader. The choice is yours." The message ended abruptly, leaving the hall in stunned silence. All eyes turned to Nyla, whose face had gone pale. Before she could process what had happened, the sound of distant explosions echoed through the colony. Red warning lights bathed the room as alarms blared. "Bounty hunters!" someone yelled. "They've breached the perimeter." Panic ensued as workers scrambled for cover, but Nyla was rooted in place, her mind reeling. "Heir? Leader? What is this madness?" The firm hand gripped her arm, and she turned to see a man clad in black combat gear. His piercing green eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that left no room for argument. "Your Highness," he said, bowing slightly, "my name is Cal Dren. Your father's final order was to protect you. We need to leave. Now." Nyla stared at him, torn between disbelief and the urgency in his tone. Outside, the colony shook under the assault, and her world, both literal and metaphorical, crumbled around her. "This way," Kale shouted, pulling her into the chaos. As they fled through the labyrinth of the colony, Nyla's mind raced. Her quiet life was over, and the truth was dawning on her. She might be the last hope for a world she'd never known. The shuttle shuddered violently as it pierced Earth's turbulent atmosphere. Nyla gripped the armrests, her knuckles white. The vast, blue-green planet loomed ahead, but instead of awe, she felt dread. "This is home," she muttered, glancing at Kale, who was expertly piloting the craft. "Not exactly welcoming, is it?" Kale replied, his voice steady despite the tension. "What you'll see below isn't what Earth once was. Decades of war have scared the surface, but the heart of its people still beats strong." Nyla wasn't convinced. She gazed out the viewport at the planet's surface, a patchwork of ruined cities, sprawling shantytowns, and sprawling industrial wastelands. The sky was thick with smog, and the faint glimmers of orbital defense platforms hinted at a world still clinging to survival. The shuttle descended toward Unity Prime, the former capital of Earth. Once a beacon of hope and progress, it now lay in partial ruins, its grand towers leaning precariously, their shadows stretching across a city of rubble and desperation. As they landed on a hidden pad near the city's outskirts, a group of armed figures emerged from the shadows. They were clad in mismatched armor, their faces obscured by masks. Nyla's stomach twisted. "Friends?" she asked nervously. "Loyalists," Kale said, "or what's left of them. They've been waiting for a sign since your father's death. Your arrival is that sign." The leader of the group stepped forward and removed her helmet, revealing sharp, weathered features and piercing eyes. "Kale, you're late," she said, her voice low but commanding. "Good to see you too, Captain Rhea," Kale replied. "This is Nyla Valter, the Chancellor's heir." Rhea studied Nyla with a mixture of skepticism and hope. "You don't look like much," she said bluntly. "Thanks for the warm welcome," Nyla shot back, masking her fear with sarcasm. Rhea smirked. "You've got some fire. Good. You'll need it if you want to survive here." The Loyalists led Nyla and Kale through a maze of tunnels beneath the city, eventually arriving at a hidden enclave. It was a stark but functional base, with walls covered in maps and holograms, displaying the fragmented state of Earth's factions. Rhea began the briefing without preamble. "Here's the situation. The Scourge has claimed credit for your father's assassination. His forces are consolidating power in the southern territories, crushing anyone who resists. The Galactic Concord is circling like vultures, ready to swoop in and take over if we can't unite the factions. And now the entire planet knows about you." "Great," Nyla said. "So everyone either wants me dead or on their side." "Exactly," Rhea said, folding her arms. "You've got a week, maybe two, before the Scourge makes his move. If you're going to lead, you need to prove you're worth following." Kale stepped forward. "We start by securing alliances. There are faction leaders who still believe in the dream of a united Earth. If we can win their trust—" Rhea cut him off. "Trust doesn't come easy anymore, Kale. She'll need more than words to sway them." Nyla's frustration boiled over. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't grow up here, and I don't know these people. Why would they follow me?" "Because," Rhea said, stepping closer, "you're the only one who can give them something to believe in. And right now, that's all we've got." Nyla swallowed hard, the enormity of her situation sinking in. For the first time, she realized this wasn't just about survival. It was about saving a planet on the brink of collapse. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice trembling but resolute. "I don't know how, but I'll do it." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over everyone. Rhea nodded. "Then we start tomorrow. You've got a throne to claim, whether you like it or not." The Loyalist base buzzed with activity, a controlled chaos as plans were drawn, supplies packed, and messages sent to potential allies. Nyla sat in the corner of the main war room, her back pressed against the cold metal wall. The enormity of her decision weighed heavily on her, but there was no turning back now. Kale approached, carrying a data pad. "You look like you're about to bolt," he said, crouching next to her. She managed a weak smile. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been in your shoes," Kale replied, handing her the datapad. "Here, study this. It's the first faction leader we'll approach, Merrick Dallos, the warden of the Northern Enclaves." Nyla scanned the file. Merrick's image was imposing. A scared face, sharp eyes, and a reputation as a ruthless but fair leader. His enclave controlled vital food and medical supplies, making him a key ally or a dangerous enemy. "Why him first?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "Because he's pragmatic," Kale said. "Merrick doesn't care about politics or ideals. He cares about survival. If we can prove aligning with you is his best chance at keeping his people safe, he'll listen. And if we can't—" Cal's expression darkened. "Then we'd better hope he doesn't kill us on sight." Rhea interrupted, her tone brisk. "We leave at dawn. Keep a low profile and don't engage unless absolutely necessary. The Scourge has spies everywhere." Nyla nodded, though her stomach churned at the thought of leaving the relative safety of the base. She'd never even held a weapon before, let alone face the dangers awaiting her outside. The journey to the northern enclaves was grueling. The Loyalist team traveled in an armored transport disguised as a supply truck, navigating through treacherous terrain and avoiding patrols loyal to the Scourge. The countryside was a stark reminder of Earth's fractured state. Villages lay in ruins, their inhabitants either displaced or forgotten. Fields once lush with crops were now barren wastelands. Earth doesn't look much like the stories my mother told me, Nyla said quietly, staring out the window. Kale, sitting across from her, sighed. It hasn't for a long time, but that's why we fight, to give it a chance to be more than this. The transport slowed as they approached the northern enclave's perimeter. Massive walls of reinforced steel loomed ahead, guarded by turrets and soldiers in heavy armor. A checkpoint barred their way, and a gruff voice crackled over the comm system. Identify yourselves. Rhea leaned forward, her voice calm but authoritative. We're here to see Merrick Dallows. Tell him it's about the Vaulter Heir. A tense silence followed. Nyla's heart raced as the guards exchanged uncertain glances. Finally, the gate creaked open, and the transport rolled forward. Inside, the enclave was a stark contrast to the wasteland outside. It was bustling with life, its people guarded but determined. The air was thick with the smell of cooking food, and the sound of children laughing, a rare glimpse of normalcy in a broken world. Merrick awaited them in a grand hall at the center of the enclave, seated on a throne carved from the remains of old industrial machinery. He rose as they entered, his presence filling the room. So, he said, his voice deep and resonant. This is the Heir we've all heard so much about. Nyla stepped forward, forcing herself to meet his gaze. I am, and I need your help. Merrick studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled, though there was little warmth in it. Merrick's smile faded as he motioned for Nyla and her companions to follow him deeper into the enclave. The grand hall led to a wide chamber filled with armed guards and a few curious onlookers. At the center stood a massive, circular platform surrounded by a low railing. You say you're the Heir, Merrick said, his voice carrying an edge of skepticism. But words mean nothing here. The people of the northern enclaves don't follow bloodlines or promises. We follow strength in action. Nyla's heart sank. What are you saying? Merrick gestured toward the platform. You'll prove yourself in the crucible. A simple test. You survive, you earn my respect. You fail. He let the sentence hang ominously. Kale stepped forward, his hand on his sidearm. This wasn't part of the plan, Merrick. We're here to form alliances, not play gladiator. Merrick's gaze hardened. And I won't send my people to die for someone who might crumble under pressure. If she's to lead, she must show she can endure. Rhea put a hand on Kale's arm, stopping him from escalating the confrontation. He's testing her, she said softly. This is how they work. Let her decide. Nyla's mind raced, every fiber of her being screamed to refuse, to walk away. But as she looked around at the faces of Merrick's people, worn but watchful, hardened by years of struggle, she realized they needed more than words. They needed hope. I'll do it, she said, her voice trembling but firm. Merrick nodded approvingly. Good. The crucible begins now. Nyla stood on the platform, her pulse pounding in her ears. The chamber fell silent as a series of gates opened, releasing a pack of mechanized drones. They were sleek, insectoid machines, each armed with sharp blades and emitting a faint hum of energy. A voice crackled over the loudspeakers. Objective: disable all drones before they disable you. You have 3 minutes. Nyla's stomach lurched. She had no weapon, no training, and no clue how to fight. The drones began to circle her, their movements predatory. Think, Nyla, she whispered to herself, her eyes darting around the platform. One of the drones lunged, and she barely managed to dive out of the way. The crowd gasped as she hit the ground hard, scraping her palms. Her gaze fell on a loose pipe near the edge of the platform. Scrambling to her feet, she grabbed it, wielding it like a makeshift staff. The next drone attacked, and she swung with all her might, striking it in the sensor array. Sparks flew as the drone stumbled backward, its systems malfunctioning. Cheers erupted from the crowd, but there was no time to celebrate. The remaining drones closed in, their movements synchronized. Nyla dodged and parried as best as she could, using the pipe to deflect their attacks. With each strike, she grew bolder, her instincts taking over. She used the drone's speed against them, forcing them to collide or overextend. One by one, they fell, their metallic husks smoking on the platform. The final drone hesitated, its algorithms seemingly calculating her newfound confidence. Nyla seized the moment, leaping forward and driving the pipe into its core. It collapsed with a screech, its lights flickering out. Panting and battered, Nyla stood victorious amid the wreckage. The chamber erupted in applause and cheers, the once skeptical faces now filled with admiration. Merrick stepped forward, his expression unreadable. He raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "You've passed the crucible," he said, "but this is only the beginning." Nyla met his gaze, her exhaustion giving way to determination. "Then let's begin." The crowd's cheers still echoed in Nyla's ears as she followed Merrick into a private chamber. It was quieter here, the noise of the enclave muffled by thick walls. Merrick gestured for her to sit at a rough-hewn table that bore the scars of countless debates and decisions. Kale and Rhea flanked Nyla, their expressions a mix of pride and worry. Merrick remained standing, his imposing frame casting a shadow over the group. "You've proven you're more than just a name," Merrick began, pouring himself a glass of amber liquid. He didn't offer any to his guests, but a single trial doesn't make a leader. "Why should I risk my people for you?" Nyla leaned forward, the soreness in her body forgotten. "Because you know as well as I do that the Scourge isn't content with ruling fragments of Earth. They'll come for the enclaves, for your people. Alone, we'll all fall. Together, we have a chance." Merrick sipped his drink, his sharp eyes never leaving hers. "Bold words, but I've seen alliances crumble under less pressure than what you're asking for." Kale interjected, his voice steady. "We're not asking for blind loyalty. We're offering a partnership. Your enclave has supplies and strength. We have information and the Heir to rally support. Combined, we can tip the scales." Merrick's lips curled into a faint smile. "And if I refuse?" Rhea crossed her arms. "Then you'll be standing alone when the Scourge comes. And they will come, Merrick. You know that as well as we do." For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the room. Finally, Merrick set his glass down with a clink and sat across from Nyla. "I'll consider your offer," he said, "but I need more than promises. Actions speak louder." Nyla nodded. "What do you need?" Merrick's expression hardened. "There's a Scourge outpost 2 clicks from here. It's been a thorn in our side for months, intercepting supplies and harassing our patrols. Take it out, and you'll have my support." Kale stiffened. "That's suicide. The Scourge will retaliate the moment they realize what's happened." Merrick shrugged. "Perhaps, or perhaps they'll underestimate a small strike team. Either way, if she's serious about uniting Earth, she'll need to get her hands dirty." Nyla's stomach tightened, but she didn't flinch. "We'll do it." Night fell over the northern enclaves as Nyla, Kale, Rhea, and a small team of loyalists prepared for the mission. The air was cold, the kind of chill that seeped into your bones and refused to leave. Kale handed Nyla a compact energy pistol. "You sure about this? It's not too late to back out." Nyla took the weapon, her grip firm despite the tremor in her fingers. "I have to do this. If I'm not willing to fight for them, how can I ask them to fight for me?" Rhea smirked. "That's the spirit. Just don't get yourself killed. We kind of need you alive." The team moved swiftly through the shadows, the outpost looming ahead like a dark sentinel. It was a small but heavily fortified structure, bristling with automated turrets and patrolling guards. Kale crouched behind a boulder, studying the layout through binoculars. 2 guards at the main gate, 3 more patrolling the perimeter. Turrets are synchronized but have a blind spot every 30 seconds. Nyla's heart pounded as she listened to the plan. Each second felt like an eternity, but there was no turning back now. "Let's move," Rhea whispered, signaling the team. As they approached the outpost, Nyla felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This wasn't a test in a controlled environment. This was life or death, and the future of their alliance depended on her. The first shot was fired, and the battle began. The team moved with precision, their movements a dance between survival and destruction. Rhea took point, her silenced rifle dispatching the 2 gate guards before they could sound an alarm. Kale led Nyla and the rest of the group toward the blind spot in the turret's rotation, timing each step to the split second. As they approached the perimeter wall, Kale whispered, "We've got 30 seconds to scale and disable the first turret. You ready?" Nyla nodded, her grip tightening on the pistol. Her heart thundered in her chest, but she pushed the fear aside. There was no room for doubt now. Kale boosted her up, and Nyla climbed swiftly, her fingers finding purchase on the rough metal. She reached the top just as the turret began its rotation back toward their position. With shaking hands, she accessed the control panel and pulled the emergency override lever. The turret powered down with a low hum. "First turret's clear," she whispered into her comm. "Good work," Rhea replied. "Move to phase 2. The team advanced through the darkened compound, their footsteps muffled by the soft dirt. The outpost guards were fewer than expected, likely a sign that the Scourge underestimated the threat of a direct attack. "Looks like the main power generator is in the central building," Kale said, gesturing to a squat structure at the heart of the outpost. "If we disable it, the whole place goes dark. No communications, no reinforcements." Nyla glanced around. The perimeter was clear for now, but they were on borrowed time. "Let's make it quick." As they approached the central building, a piercing alarm shattered the quiet. One of the guards must have found the bodies at the gate. "Move," Rhea barked, her rifle firing at a group of guards rushing toward them. The team sprinted to the central building, ducking under the hail of enemy fire. Nyla's muscles burned, but she pushed forward, covering Kale as he hot-wired the access panel. "Got it," he shouted as the door slid open. Inside, the air was thick with the hum of machinery. The generator loomed before them, a massive structure of coils and conduits. Kale rushed to the control panel while Rhea and the others held off the guards outside. "Can you shut it down?" Nyla asked, her voice strained. Kale grimaced. "It's not just shutting it down. We need to overload it to make this place unusable for the Scourge." "Do it," Nyla said without hesitation. Kale worked quickly, his fingers flying over the controls. The hum of the generator grew louder, the lights flickering as the system approached critical mass. Rita's voice crackled over the comm. "We've got more incoming. 2 hovercrafts, fully armed. We need to move now." "Almost there," Kale shouted. The generator erupted in a blinding flash of light and heat. The building shook as the explosion ripped through the outpost, sending debris and flames into the night sky. Nyla and Kale stumbled out, coughing through the smoke. Rhea grabbed them, pulling them toward cover as the remaining guards scrambled in disarray. "You did it," Rhea said, a grin breaking through the soot on her face. But Nyla wasn't celebrating. Her eyes scanned the battlefield, counting their team. "We're not all here," she said, her voice hollow. One of their loyalists, a young fighter named Dax, had stayed behind to buy them time. His sacrifice was the price of their victory, and Nyla felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders. As they disappeared into the shadows, the outpost burned behind them. The Scourge would notice, and retaliation was inevitable. But Nyla's resolve only hardened. This was the beginning of something greater, a spark that could ignite the fires of rebellion. The moon hung low in the sky as Nella and her team made their way back to the northern enclaves. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burning metal and the lingering tension of the mission. Their steps were slow, the weight of their actions pressing down on each of them, but none of them spoke. The cost of victory had already been paid. Dax was gone. They had left him behind, his last act one of defiance, holding off the advancing Scourge forces to ensure the mission succeeded. Nyla couldn't shake the image of his face, the young, determined soldier who had trusted her and given his life for the cause. Her stomach churned with guilt, but she swallowed it down. Dax didn't die for nothing. This is what we fight for. This is what we must do. Kel's voice broke the silence as they approached the enclave's outer gates. We've been marked, Nyla. The Scourge won't let this go. Rhea shot him a look. Tell me something we don't already know. Kel ignored her, his tone grave. They'll come for us in force. That explosion, there'll be no way to hide it from them. And once they figure out who hit them, it's not just the Scourge we'll have to worry about. Other factions will want a piece of us too. Nyla clenched her fists. We'll deal with that when it comes. Right now, we need to regroup. As the gates creaked open, a small crowd of supporters and loyalists awaited them. They had been watching from the watchtowers, waiting for any sign of success. Nyla felt their eyes on her, their hopes and expectations rising with each step she took. She couldn't afford to show weakness, not now. Merrick stood at the front, his expression unreadable as the team entered. His gaze lingered on Nyla for a moment longer than necessary, and she saw the flicker of respect in his eyes. You did what I asked, he said, his voice cool but not without admiration. The Scourge won't take this lightly, but you've proven you're capable. I didn't do it alone, Nyla replied, her voice hoarse. She glanced at Kel and Rhea, who nodded in silent agreement. We've all made sacrifices. Merrick's eyes softened, if only for a moment. I'm aware. I've lost more than I care to count in this fight. But now you've shown my people that there's hope. That Earth can still stand. Nyla felt the weight of his words, but she didn't allow herself to soften. There was no time for sentimentality. She had bigger battles ahead. Merrick stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. There's something else you should know. Nyla raised an eyebrow, her guard instinctively going up. What is it? A group of Scourge warships is headed toward the western front, bypassing our defenses. It's a direct assault. He paused, watching her closely. If we don't stop them, we risk losing everything. Kel's eyes narrowed. They're making a move sooner than expected. They're mobilizing, and it's not just the Scourge. Word of your victory is already spreading, Nyla. Other factions are watching. They'll move on the enclaves soon too, sensing weakness. Nyla felt the heat of determination flood through her. Then we'll give them something to fear. We'll make them regret underestimating Earth. She turned to Rhea and Kel, their faces set with resolve. Get the troops ready. It's time to fight for more than just survival. It's time to strike back. As the team scattered to prepare, Nyla stood before Merrick. You said you wanted action, Merrick. You're about to get it. Merrick gave a single sharp nod. Good. Because we're in this together now, whether we like it or not. Nyla took one last look at the northern enclave, the settlement that had offered her hope. But hope isn't enough, not anymore. As the war drums began to beat, Nyla knew that the real battle was only just beginning. The Scourge would come, and so would the others. But this time, Earth would not be caught off guard. This time, they would fight back, and they would win. The air buzzed with the harsh hum of preparation. The enclave's defenses were reinforced, hastily but effectively, as Nella's forces scrambled to assemble their remaining fighters. It wasn't enough time to truly prepare, but the Scourge were on their way, and there was no time to waste. Earth's final ruler, Nayla, stood at the heart of the base, the weight of leadership pressing down on her shoulders like a storm. Her eyes scanned the battlegrounds outside the enclave, her mind running through the possibilities. Every faction on Earth had heard the Scourge were coming. The shockwave from their assault on the outer outpost would have rippled through every channel and dark alley. Nyla had only one goal: to stop them. "We can't win this battle by playing defense," Kale said, stepping up beside her. His face was grim, but his resolve matched hers. "We need to hit them before they hit us." Nyla nodded, her fingers tapping the worn surface of her command desk. "The Western Front is our priority, but they won't just come from one direction. They'll send in reinforcements, and they'll want Earth's final stronghold under their control. We've got no choice but to hit them hard and fast, now or never." Kale wasn't wrong. The Scourge's warships were already closing in, and if they could breach the defenses before the Earth forces were ready, the Enclave would fall. The battle for Earth's future would begin in these moments. "Gather the ground troops," Nyla ordered, her voice clear and authoritative. "We're heading to the Western Front, but I want scouts sent out in every direction. I don't want any surprises." Her second-in-command, Rhea, nodded, her lips tight with determination. "Understood. We're with you, Nyla, always." The entire team rallied around her, a unified force in the face of impossible odds. As the soldiers geared up, they moved swiftly, each of them carrying the weight of their commitment, not just to Earth, but to the memory of those they had lost along the way. Dax's face flashed through Nyla's mind again, but she pushed the grief aside. There was no room for weakness now. The hum of engines and the clatter of weaponry filled the air as the team piled into the transport vehicles. The Scourge were on the move. The sky above rippled with the promise of violence, dark shapes in the distance signaling the warship's descent. They could hear the sound of engines roaring in the distance, but Nyla held her ground. This was Earth's final stand, and no matter the cost, it would not fall without a fight. The first wave of Scourge warriors hit the outskirts of the Enclave just as the ground troops were dispatched. Massive, armored infantry squads moved in on foot, while hovercrafts darted across the landscape, lasers flashing in every direction. Rhea opened fire, picking off the first few enemies as they advanced. Kale and Nyla worked in unison, moving through the front lines with deadly precision, the fire of their weapons relentless. But as the enemy numbers grew, Nyla could feel the tide of battle turning. The Scourge were everywhere, more than anticipated. The Enclave's defenses, though sturdy, were not enough to hold off an enemy of this magnitude. "Fall back," Nyla shouted, her voice commanding. "We can't hold them off forever. Regroup at the central compound." Her troops moved in a coordinated retreat, pushing forward and never losing ground. They fought with desperation, driven by the memory of what they stood to lose. But Nyla knew this was only the beginning. As she and her team reached the central compound, a sudden blinding light exploded in the sky, the Scourge's flagship descending with horrifying speed. The final assault had begun. But Nyla had one last surprise in store: a secret weapon, buried deep within the Enclave's vault, ready for just this moment. With one last look at her team, Nyla gave the signal. "Activate the orbital defense system," she commanded. The ground shook as massive energy cannons erupted from the Enclave's hidden infrastructure. A brilliant beam of concentrated energy shot toward the Scourge flagship. The sky seemed to explode with light as the Scourge flagship shuddered, its shields faltering. "Now get them with everything," Nyla screamed, her voice raw with adrenaline. As the Scourge flagship faltered, Earth's final warriors launched their final offensive. Ground forces advanced, supported by the orbital cannons, and the battle turned in their favor. Earth had fought back, and for the first time in years, they had the Scourge on the defensive. Nyla stood at the front lines, breathing hard, her weapons still smoking. This was her moment. This was the final fight, and Earth would not fall today. With the enemies retreating and Earth's forces rallying behind their leader, Nyla knew the war wasn't over. But Earth had its last ruler now, and as long as she breathed, she would fight until every last enemy was vanquished. This was just the beginning.